Today we're talking about violence in video games. This was a big debate a few years ago when the Evangelical Christian crowd was all over this topic, and they said that violence in games would make people shoot up schools or engage in lives of crime or whatever. And that went on for a while. Christians were saying that games were going to be a gateway to Satanism and all things demonic and such. And then after a while, they pretty much lost interest because gaming stopped being a new phenomena. And I think we had a decade or so of amazing games being produced before the left-leaning activists with their woke agendas started to kind of do something similar, using gaming media as a platform for virtue signaling, trying to say that it's necessary to change things up because they had their own agenda they wanted to push. They thought traditional things are somehow offensive. In any case, laying all of that aside, there is this pretty valid question of, is violence in games bad? And if it isn't, then why is it not bad? Because as a society, we don't want to be violent. We shouldn't want to be violent. So it would stand to reason that if violence in real life is wrong, then maybe violence in games is wrong too, right? But I think to answer this, it's important to take into consideration the fact that there's really two different kinds of stories involving violence. There's gratuitous violence, where it feels like essentially you're endorsing violence. You're saying that violence should be a way of life. You're probably telling a story which makes the viewer, the player, admire the violence and kind of live out some sort of a twisted fantasy. And if that's what it is, then that's not right, because we shouldn't have some sort of sick, twisted, evil desire to do bad things and then use video games or some sort of entertainment as a way to safely live out our twisted fantasies. If that's really all it is, then I can't put my endorsement on that. And I think to some degree there are some titles that are like this. Grand Theft Auto comes to mind, and I'm not saying Grand Theft Auto is a terrible game. I haven't played the game. I don't know what the story elements in the game are like. What I do know, though, is it's kind of a game that's about stealing things, stealing cars, shooting civilians, and robbing, carjacking, things like that. And I know that we have a desire sometimes to be rebels, and that's natural to a point. But is that really a good game with a good moral premise to it? I think we'd have to say probably not. It's not necessarily the end of the world, but is it really a great moral thing? I'd say no, probably not. But that's not the lion's share of games. Like, most games are not really celebrating lawlessness. Maybe it's military combat, maybe it's violence in a fantasy setting. But whatever it is, in general, when you have something horrific, something evil, something dark, and it's contrasted with this story of light, when it's used as a narrative plot device to show you this is why we're fighting. This is what we're fighting for. When evil is a tool for making us want to root for the good guys because we have seen why their fight matters. In that context, the portrayal of dark themes and evil and violence in games is good. Not because the violence is good, but because it tells a story that is good. It enables us to explore topics which encourage us to root for principles of nobility, heroism, and doing the right thing when the right thing isn't easy. Stories of virtue can't really be told if you don't have a backdrop of something unvirtuous, something depraved, something evil. You just can't fight for good if there isn't anything to fight against. So, one might say that in many cases, as a narrative device, as long as you portray a contrast between darkness and light, between good and evil, there's absolutely nothing wrong with violence in games. To the contrary, it's actually a good thing because it teaches us moral lessons using allegory. Another thing that's worth mentioning when we talk about violence in games is that there's really a big difference between violence, which is gory and really graphic, and more stylized violence. For example, combat in a MMORPG is not graphic at all. It's not really all about showing blood and guts. It's more just a mechanic for you leveling up your character, and it's symbolic of probably the spiritual fight that we go through in our lives. So maybe in real life we face monsters that don't have a physical body, like credit card debt or a manipulative relationship or a bad boss or some situation that asks us to compromise our values and we have to make a stand for what we believe in. But all of those things in real life are the banality of evil. They are those things that don't really look evil, and yet they do evil in our lives. And we have to level up our character in life so that we can stand against those things. But in a game or a movie, we can give those things form to a point. We can have the bad guys coming at us with knives and axes. And there's something comforting about facing obstacles you can see, when quite often in the world we have to overcome obstacles that do exist in shades of gray and often come to us in the form of people who should be our friends and allies. So in some cases, violence is a narrative tool for telling great stories. And in some cases, violence is a mechanic for exploring the metaphor of adventure in our lives. Sometimes it's just for arcadey fun too. And maybe there's no nobility in that, but I also think there's not really any harm in that either. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, right? And I think there are a lot of situations where people will criticize something that will hypothetically do evil while they ignore things which actually are doing measurable harm. And, you know, to use as the example of the old days when people would talk a lot about violence in games being harmful, well, you know, yeah, we could say that violence in games is bad and it's making kids turn out bad. But you know what might be worse? Maybe the deterioration of the nuclear family and children that are raised in single parent households near the poverty line. Do you think that that might be more of a reason for why kids have mental health problems or they have disturbed issues? Maybe it's not that they played Grand Theft Auto. That's not the reason why they're disturbed. It's something a lot more measurable, something a lot more real. But if you pick a boogeyman that's easy to pick on, then you can wage war against that instead of addressing bigger elephants in the room. In any case, I think about stories like The Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson's original trilogy. Think about these amazing scenes of frightening orcs and evil villains all coming together and waging war against the protagonists and making it seem like there is no hope at all. And then we see the forces of light come through. We see the redemption arc, and we come away feeling like we know who these characters are. We feel like we've traveled with them for an epic journey. And then we feel inspired and moved because we think about the challenges in our own lives. And we're determined that we're going to come away, and maybe it won't be with a physical sword that we're fighting. Maybe it'll be a metaphorical sword, but we're determined to sharpen our blade and find a way through and overcome insurmountable odds. That's, to me, what fantasy storytelling should be all about. And I do think that we lose something when we shift too far toward this idea that we always have to tell both sides of the story. We always have to be a little bit sympathetic with the antagonists, because we live in a time when we want to say there is no such thing as absolute good or absolute evil. And I think the risk there is that we wind up starting to erode the reason why we tell stories to begin with. Because if you don't really believe that there is such a thing as evil, then why portray evil? What is the point? And there's a lot of games out there where there are frightening looking monsters because they're designed in a way that is conventionally frightening or dark looking, but they don't really feel like they have any soul behind them either. Like, you just get used to it. So when everything is supposed to be dark and big and bad and scary, then nothing is dark or big or bad and scary. It's just more random noise in the background. And that's something which I think we did better at in the past in franchises and in stories when it was considered to be acceptable and appropriate to just have a hero and a villain. And there was no need to make the hero seem like they weren't all good. There was no effort to make the villain seem sympathetic or to take their side a little bit. When I look at characters that a lot of people make in video games these days, especially player-created characters, I see a lot of weird, creepy kind of characters people like to make, where it's just sort of unsettling and jarring. It's the weird kind of characters where it's almost like people prefer to role play as something that is not conventionally attractive or heroic. And it does feel like there's a certain degree of degeneracy in people's tastes. Like, people just want to say that good is evil and evil is good, to quote a Bible phrase. I'm not religious, but I think people start to, in our modern times, people are a little bit interested in being rebellious. I think that's what it is. And so instead of having traditional antagonists, traditional heroes, and we emulate our heroes and we try to avoid being like the bad guys, now there's a lot more shades of gray, a lot more of a desire to kind of take the side of the bad guy, to say the bad guy is a good guy who just wasn't really understood. And that erodes the value of being proud to root for your hero. It erodes the reason why violence tells a story as a narrative device. Because if you're not going to root for the heroes, then why have them at all? So I think morally gray stories are something that doesn't resonate with me. I think gratuitous violence does not resonate. I think that violence as a storytelling tool, though, is healthy and a positive part of fantasy adventures. And there's a difference between violence that is there to tell a story literally and violence that is intended to be perhaps more of an allegory for all of the things in life that don't really have any sort of corporeal form, but we have to face them anyway. Being able to think about life as a grand adventure, fighting the bad guys to overcome evil and win the day, I think that's a good way to look at life. And if you don't have some kind of conflict, it's hard to drive a narrative. That being said, though, I do think it's interesting how we start to see some games in the RPG space that have figured out how to create narrative devices which aren't based on combat and violence. And I like that. You know, like Nikki Infinity just came out or is coming out, and it's sort of a girls dress-up game in the style of Genshin Impact. But I was watching some videos of play through of that game, and it's all just basically cute stuff, and, you know, it's not a dark game at all, but it still has leveling mechanics, and it still has protagonists and things like that. And it's meant to appeal, you know, not to guys, really. A guy could play the game, but it's meant to appeal to girls, which is fine. I think there's some other good examples like Palia MMO that is focused on just, cozy gaming kind of experiences, or even Black Desert Online, or some of the MMOs that have life skills. It's nice to, maybe even in a combat centric game, to be able to choose a path that is more meditative and more peaceful and less about whacking and killing things. But at the end of the day, violence, if it tells a story and doesn't glorify violence, can be a really inspiring way to work through the mechanics of being heroic and striving for success in your adventure in life. So what do you think about violence in games? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Do you think it doesn't matter? I'd love to talk about it some more. As always, thanks so much for watching.